Hey guys, I had an opportunity to send one of my pistols off just recently to Doug up at ATEi. Doug works on a number of different guns, but most specifically some of the more popular work he does is with Glocks and M&Ps. I had sent up one of my M&Ps and he put a number of different features on this gun, everything from side cocking serrations to serrations up here on the top of the slide, milled it out for an RMR and put some suppressor sights on it for me as well. Does a lot of great stippling work. And the biggest thing to understand about this is that there's a number of these benefits that go along with all these new modifications that Doug's able to do that are more than just being purely cosmetic.
Yeah, the first thought is we look at it as it's cosmetic. For those that have been to my Handgun 2 class, you realize how much one-handed manipulation that we do. And yes, we can catch and cycle the gun and manipulate the gun off rear sights if they're built well. We can also do it off the ejection port. However, when you start putting in more cock serrations, you're putting in more ability to grab fabric, grab a table, a car tire, a trunk, the side mirror. There's a lot of different advantages that you can. It's just giving you another point of contact every time you're in more of a jam because you're only utilizing one hand at this point. So there are a lot of different benefits to it, and Stephen's even going to go into the RMR actually.
Yeah, you're starting to see these more out in classes now, especially, and even just elsewhere in the shooting community. One of the big things about this is that especially for older shooters, eyesight starts to deteriorate a little bit. The biggest thing is now you've got an advantage of having your focal point of your aiming, as well where your point of aim, as well as the target be on the same sort of focal plane. So you're not having to focus on three different objects at once, being the rear sight, the front sight, and the target. You've actually just got a dot floating out there in space that you can superimpose on the target, and from that point just press the shot. So there's a lot of other benefits there. Further than that, there's some advantages when you look at night vision as well.
If you'll notice first how he has it set up, he's got backup suppressor sights anyway. So a lot of the controversy is it's a dot, it could go off, it's battery powered. Yes, it could. Then the irons are there. Utilize the irons to your advantage. However, what you definitely see as an advantage, like Stephen just said, is for the older shooter who generally has bifocals. He has to look at objects that are close, which means generally to really see his sights, he uses his bifocal. And then when he has to focus far away, this allows him to focus on that one thing like you had just mentioned. So also an advantage on cycling the gun. You can cycle off the RMR. They're really built in, hard and durable, and the way Doug mounts them to the gun, they're really almost bomber proof. So that gives you an advantage as well. What you start to see when you start running night courses and you start running night vision, now that night vision is a little bit more readily available to the public, we start seeing it a lot more in classes. The thing about it is transitioning to the handgun at night is usually real tough when you're running duels or even if you're running a PVS-14. The transition to that handgun, most people, you're probably already running a visible laser on your carbine at that point. So that's usually an IR laser to work with your night vision on your head mount. Well, now when you're running the RMR, you can actually transition and pick up the dot. And the cool thing about it is you're running in a more passive manner, vice an IR laser that's basically being cracked out and everybody can see it. So there are a lot of other advantages to the RMR.
Absolutely. I had an opportunity to go ahead and run a setup very, very similar to this one in a recent course down in College Station with a set of PVS 23s, and I can tell you that what you're actually able to do is just focus that night vision down range at a distance where you're going to be able to see those targets. And basically when you present that gun out in front of you, how you're traditionally going to hold it, the gun, your hands, everything else just melts away, and all you see is just basically a dot just floating in space. It's an incredibly effective system, especially when you're running it at night. Doug also does a lot of work with stippling, ergonomic stuff, as well as grip enhancements. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
So a good indicator is how much of a stippling job do you need? And texture, and I think, is extremely important. If you wonder how important it is, take a little bit of dish soap, put it on your hands, get your hands just a little bit wet, and start grabbing your gun. Obviously, make sure it's unloaded, do it in a safe manner. What you'll start to see is little things that you start practicing, like your draw, your speed reloads. Things get really slippery very fast. The dish soap is really good because it mimics what would happen if you end up getting blood on your hand. But a lot of times it's not just blood. It can be just the fact that you're wet, muddy. I mean, I live in Florida, so you're pretty much sweating all the time. I appendix carry, so every time I grab my gun, it's wet. But that water or any type of blood that you may get on the grip, you have those little bit of pores that are going to absorb it, so to speak, so that you can actually get a good dominant grip on the gun. And I find that a lot of shooters in my class, and I know in your classes as well, you find shooters are constantly trying to find the same index point. So having an up forward index point for your reaction thumb is extremely important. Not only that, but having it to where the grip doesn't slip, because many times guys will fire and then they readjust their grip, and they fire and they readjust their grip. This stops you from doing that. I don't have time in a gunfight to be readjusting my grip. So all these little things between the cock serrations, the grip texturing, and the RMR are all these little things that are being done to enhance that overall performance for you. Not only that, but now that suppressors are being utilized a lot more, this actually helps in conjunction with the suppressor. So if you're running suppressed, now the benefit is my dot will actually clear my can. So I don't have to just utilize or think about utilizing suppressor sights. I can actually be even more accurate by having an RMR on, utilizing a suppressor, and then still getting really good shots, follow-up shots, and such.
Absolutely. The RMR is something that is obviously has taken me a little bit of a while to get used to. I can tell you that the easiest thing that I found is to just basically drive the gun out as if I was going ahead and trying to find my front sight, and it seems like the dot just shows up right in the window almost immediately. It's helped tremendously for working at distance and also transitioning between targets, but at distance is where this thing really, really shines. I can tell you that running a plate rack at 40 or even 50 yards it's very, very possible. It's doable with an optic such as this, especially when you apply proper fundamentals, good trigger control and grip, everything from there. But having a red dot, especially getting the correct model, a model with a smaller MOA dot is really going to be beneficial for you when you're looking at a purpose such as that.
I'll talk to you about one other thing, and that's a big problem that we find, of course, in classes, and that is 90% of the time, most missed shots, I believe, are related to trigger control issues. The trigger is a vital organ on that gun. So what do you really have for options on the M&P? Well, Apex makes some decent triggers that are out on the market that you can basically drop in. And they do enhance and they do make the trigger pull better. But for me personally, as much as I like those, and as much as I've used student triggers and seen them perform now and last, and they're really durable, I still, when I send my gun off to Doug, I prefer the way he does his trigger job, because I can have a very predictable wall, meaning once I take the slack out of that trigger and I can really get to that wall, I get a much smoother press and break. Mainly what I really like too is the reset that he does on the triggers. So he has some different trigger package options. So really it's kind of like one-stop shopping. You can get cock serrations done to the gun, you can get a grip job done to the gun, and then you can, if you decide that you ever want to play around or mess around with more of a RMR style configuration, he'll do it as well. And of course, just like Steven said earlier, the M&Ps and the Glocks are the most popular guns, but I've had him do work on my shotguns as well. So he's definitely a jack of all trades.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I really, really encourage you guys to go ahead and take a look at all the work that Doug does. ATEi.com. Be sure to go ahead and follow us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on the web, 21cg.us and costalutis.com. Until next week, stay gunfighter strong.
Stay safe.